Alright, so now today what we're going to talk about is solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So last time we did the square root method. The quadratic formula, if you write an equation in standard form, which we've done before when we factored it, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So like there's a little song that goes with this. If you guys were in person, I would sing that to you. So I'll go ahead and sing it now. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so you have to know the quadratic formula. So it says, how can you use the quadratic formula to find the solutions? So what we're going to do is we want to get it to standard form. So I need to subtract my 4x over. So I'm going to say x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. So then the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So what I need to do is find my a, my b, and my c. Well, my a is 1 because that's the number in front of the x squared. My b is negative 4, and my c is negative 7. So then I just plug in those numbers to the equation. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 7 all over 2 times 1. So then we simplify. Negative 4 becomes a positive 4 plus or minus the square root. Here's where I see the most errors normally. Whenever you're doing this, negative 4 squared is negative 4 times negative 4. So what's a negative times a negative? Well, hopefully you're saying that's a positive, so that would be 16 minus 4 times 1 times negative 7. So it's a negative 4 times a positive 1 times a negative 7. So a negative times a negative would give me a positive 28 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. So that would do 16 plus 28, which is 44. Now we're going to take the square root of 44. And you're going to get 4 plus or minus 6.633 divided by 2. And sometimes you are going to get decimals on these. So now to find your two answers, see how there's a plus or a minus sign here? I would say 4 plus 6.633 divided by 2 is one answer. Or x is equal to 4 minus 6.633 divided by 2. So I'm going to take 6.633 plus 4 divided by 2. And I get one of my answers is 5.3165. Or I'm going to take 4 minus 6.633. I'm going to divide it by 2. And I get negative 1.3165. So those are your two answers using the quadratic formula. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to try these next two problems by yourself. So find the solutions of each equation using the quadratic formula. Hopefully on this one, I'm going to subtract x squared. You could move everything to the right side, it's kind of up to you. I'm going to say negative x squared minus 4x plus 21. I'm going to put it in standard form. So then my a would be negative 1, my b would be negative 4, and my c would be 21. So I'm going to say x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all divided by 2a. So you get 16 plus 84 inside the square root. So then I have 4 plus or minus the square root of 100 divided by 2. Well, what is the square root of 100? You type it into your calculator, you would get 10. So then I'm going to write my two answers and solve them. So I'm going to say 4 plus 10 divided by 2, or x equals 4 minus 10 divided by 2. So this should be 7, or x is going to be negative 3. All right, on the next one, I would subtract 24. I'm going to say a equals 1, b equals negative 2, c equals negative 24. Because I had to get it to standard form first to find my a by b and a c. So then I would say x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So I get 4 plus 96 So then I'm going to write my two answers. After I get the square root of 100, I simplify that to 10. So then I would say x equals 2 plus 10 divided by 2, or x equals 2 minus 10 divided by 2. So I'm going to get 6, or negative 4. All right. The nice thing about the quadratic formula, guys, is even if you can't factor or you can't do the square root method, the quadratic formula always works. So normally what we try to do is we try to do factoring, the square root method, and then our last resort is the quadratic formula because we know it always works. So it says the function shown represents the height of a frog x seconds after it jumps off a rock. How many seconds is the frog in the air before it lands on the ground? All right. So we want to know the time. And if it says it lands on the ground, well, what height is the ground going to be? Well, that's going to be 0. So this will be y equals 0. So we're going to say 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 10t plus 0.75. Well, now that's set up as a quadratic equation to solve because it's set equal to 0. So we're going to use a 0 factor probably. So we try to factor it. We can do the square root method, but we're probably going to end up doing the quadratic formula. So my a is negative 16, my b is 10, my c is 0.75. And guys, again, the reason why I set it equal to 0 is because it says how many seconds will the frog be in there before it lands on the ground? Well, that's 0 down here. So I'm going to say x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So we get negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100. I would take into my calculator 4 times 16 times 0.75. I would get 48. All over negative 32. So I'm going to say negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 148, which I'm actually going to square root. So here's my two possible answers. Negative 10 plus, when you do the square root of 148, you get 12.166 divided by negative 32. Or x equals negative 10 minus 12.166 divided by negative 32. So let's type these in. The first one, I don't know if you guys noticed, but you should get a negative answer. So here's the issue with this one. So 12.166 minus 10 divided by 32, that is negative. So I get negative 0.0676. Are you ever going to have a negative time? The answer is no, so I know this one has to be the answer that works. So I'm going to say 10 negative minus 12.166 divided by 32 negative. Get 0.692. 3x if you round. So it's going to take 0.693 seconds for the frog to hit the ground. That's how long he was in the air. All right. So it says the height of another frog over time is modeled by the function y equals negative 16t squared plus 10t plus 0.3. How many seconds is this frog in the air before landing on the ground? Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So that's going to be 2 decimal spots. You guys go ahead and pause the video and try this one. Again, if it's on the ground, what's the height going to be? It's going to be a 0. So hopefully you said negative 10 plus or minus 10 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 0.3 all over 2 times negative 16. So I would take the square root of 119.2 and you would get negative 10 plus or minus 10.92 divided by negative 32. Again, we're probably going to use the negative one because we're dividing by negative. Just make sure the answer gives you positive. So this frog takes 0.65 seconds, whereas the other frog took 0.693 seconds. Okay? So then it says, how can you determine the number of solutions of a quadratic equation without solving it? Well, we solve for something called the discriminant. So the discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac part inside your square root. If the b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, you're going to have 2 solutions. If the b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, you're going to have 1 solution. And if it's b squared minus 4ac less than 0, you're going to have 2 imaginary solutions. So this be it. Should say real, should say real. Okay, I would write these 3 options down just so you have them. So if it's greater than 0, you have 2 real solutions. If it's equal to 0, you have 1 real solution. And if it's less than 0, you have 2 imaginary solutions. So all I want to know is the discriminant so I can find the number of roots of each equation. Now, this is 2 imaginary solutions or it's 0 real solutions. And that's what we're going to focus on. So you kind of learn this in upper level math. I'm going to throw this in there just to kind of tell you what it is. However, we care about the real solutions. So if it's less than 0, we're going to say it has 0 real solutions. So I'm going to say b squared minus 4ac. So my b is negative 10, my a is 1, and my c is 25. So I'm going to take negative 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 25. So I'm going to get 100 minus 100, which is equal to 0. So how many solutions do I have? I have 1 solution to this quadratic problem. Next one, my a is negative 1, my b is negative 6, and my c is negative 10. So I'm going to say negative 6 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 10. So I'm going to get 36 minus 40, which is negative 4. So I have 0 real solutions because it was a negative number. And again, we're going to focus on the real solutions, not the imaginary solutions. So if it's greater than 0, it has 2 real solutions. If it's equal to 0, it has 1. And if it's less than 0, it has 0 real solutions. All right? And roots are called solutions. They mean the same thing. Just another key word that you need to know. So roots are solutions, and we should have talked about that before. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Your homework's going to be a Pearson assignment. So again, reach out if you need any help.